learning. Welcome everyone, welcome to our first and the premiere episode of Critical Conversations with our host, Dr. Dennis Ignatius. And, just to quickly introduce our great host who's going to be joining us shortly, Dennis Ignatius is the author of the best-selling book, Paradise Lost, Mahathir and the End of Hope. Dennis, we want to welcome you to the show, and we look forward to this amazing conversation. We're going to have a conversation with an amazing guest today. Tell us a bit about the show and tell us who is going to be appearing on the show today.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the first episode of Critical Conversations, where we ask the hard questions and examine the sensitive issues that's on everyone's mind. In my latest book, Paradise Lost and the End of Hope, I examined a number of critical challenges and issues facing our nation. In Critical Conversations, I hope to continue the discussion by engaging key leaders and newsmakers in a series of frank, straightforward, no-nonsense discussion. I've already lined up a fascinating list of speakers, and you won't want to miss any of these episodes. I'm also inviting you to join the conversation by writing in with your questions and your comments. I've already received loads of questions, and I'm going to try to cover some of the issues that you have raised. This evening, I want to welcome my very first guest, Tan Sri Tommy Thomas, one of the nation's most renowned constitutional lawyers, and of course, the Attorney General of Malaysia during the tumultuous years of the Pakatan Harapan administration. His recent book, My Story, Justice in the Wilderness, was a top seller. If you haven't read the book, I urge you to get a copy. You won't be disappointed. I, for one, am delighted that Tan Sri took the time to chronicle his years as a lawyer and Attorney General because it provides us with a fascinating insight into some of the major events that have taken place in our nation. I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said that an informed citizenry is vital for the functioning of democracy. And here to help us understand some of the issues and the challenges that we face as a nation today is Tan Sri Tommy Thomas. Tan Sri, welcome to Critical Conversations.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm honored to be the first guest of your show.
So many people have written in. There's obviously a great deal of excitement about having you on the show. So many people have written in with so many questions. So let me jump right in by asking you about your book, if I may. Why did you write the book, and why Justice in the Wilderness?
I was influenced by George Orwell in my early career as a lawyer, and he gave a couple of reasons as to why he wrote. And I think two of those reasons resonate for me, which is one is to try and set the record straight. You're writing to set out the history and the facts as to why some things happened. And secondly, in George Orwell's case, he was very much a political writer and activist. He took part in the Spanish Civil War. For him, politics mattered. So I would say that those two were important factors that drove me to write.
Okay.
And then why the title?
Yes.
I think justice that I had in mind wasn't limited to legal justice that people would assume since I'm a lawyer. I think the point I was trying to make was that justice is really an all-encompassing word, and you can take into account economic justice, social justice, political justice, justice as opposed to injustice. A wilderness, well, I think there was a historical basis for it. There is the Bible refers to it, and Winston Churchill referred to it when it was the political wilderness. So it's an old and tried word that I was trying to revive.
Thank you.
I claim no originality in any of those words.
Tan Sri, few books have created as much controversy as your book in recent times. There were 134 police reports. You are being investigated for defamation, for violating the Official Secrets Act, for sedition. You were called by police, and now there's even a task force. What's going on here, and are you worried?
No, I'm not. I'm not worried. I just hope that more people would buy the book and read the book. I think when the police reports were launched very early on, probably in the first week, there's no doubt that nobody could have read it. First of all, it wasn't even available in the market at that stage, and even if it had been bought, it would take some time to come to grips with it. So what one assumed was they looked at the index and looked for their names and then just lodged police reports without reading them. Of course, now 10, 11 months later, the position has changed. And of course, I am facing one or two suits in court arising from the book. So that's the present status, but life goes on.
One question I received was some of your detractors had suggested that it was perhaps inappropriate for you to reveal the contents of your discussion with the king and the prime minister, which was meant to be confidential. How do you respond to that?
Well, if you look at biographies of prime ministers, and prime ministers in the UK in particular, in Australia, in India, and even in Malaysia, our prime ministers have written. And there's no way a prime minister could write a book without revealing some of his conversations with the head of state. So that's happened before. You can't write about it without disclosing that, because the reader wants to know what the prime minister say to his queen, say in the UK, or in India to the president. So of course, as an attorney general, my dealings were more with members of the executive branch, and I was very careful about not revealing confidential stuff which would be really confidential. Let me give you an example. We were negotiating with Singapore on the price of water, for example. I never disclosed what was the claim we put forward and what Singapore offered. So that would be highly confidential. Likewise, when we were negotiating with Goldman Sachs, after charging them, that's mentioned in the book, I never once said what was the figure we asked Goldman's and what was their response, because those would be the nitty-gritty details which are meant to be confidential. Nobody was surprised that Malaysia was talking to Singapore. It makes sense for neighbors to talk to each other. Nobody was surprised that Goldman Sachs sent their delegations to Kuala Lumpur on 2 or 3 occasions. They were aware we were meeting. So I was just describing a bit more about the meetings, but not disclosing the secrets, if I may say that.
Thank you. Let me shift a little bit to the other parts of your book. You talk about your family history, and like Mahathir, you too trace your family roots back to Kerala in India. You obviously are very proud of your heritage. Mahathir, on the other hand, seems almost embarrassed by it. I think in one quotation, in one press conference, he said that he had only a few spoonfuls of Indian blood left in him. Why do you think he's so embarrassed about his Indian heritage? And do you think his obsession with race in his political framework has anything to do with it?
Well, I can't answer that for him, and I gather he's going to be one of your guests down the road. But I can answer for myself, which is that for me, the origins of a person and his antecedents and his pedigree and his background matters very much. And so I wanted to explain to the reader my origins and the origins of my family and the roots insofar as much as we knew. So to me, that was quite important. And it's finally, of course, it's up to each reader. And I won't be surprised if a lot of readers skip those paragraphs or chapters and say, look, we don't particularly care. I understand that too. But insofar as Dr. M is concerned, I think you'll have to ask him why he takes the position he takes.
You are more of a diplomat than I am.
But I must tell you that in all my conversations with Tun, I never asked him that question. So I think I must ask him next time when I see him.
Okay. Now, in your book, you also write about the shock and the dismay you felt when Dr. Mahathir engineered the sacking of Tun Saleh Abbas in 1998. And yet, years later, and here I'm referencing from your book again, you lobbied Dr. Mahathir to be appointed Attorney General. A number of people who wrote in wanted to know why you lobbied so hard for the post. What did you did you think that Mahathir had changed? Why did you think you could work with him given his atrocious track record?
Well, let's take it's in parts. So let's take the judicial crisis first. I should discuss that in my book. I think there were a few actors involved in the decision of the executive to take action against the 6 judges, and which resulted in the 3 of them being removed, including Tun Saleh Abbas, the Lord President. Certainly, the Attorney General, the then Attorney General, was very much involved. The Chief Justice, who was just the late Hamid Omar, was very much involved. The young Diputan Agong was involved. The Prime Minister was involved. We don't know that, which is to Dr. M. We don't know enough, and they have never disclosed the archives fully as to their respective roles. So it'll be sufficient to say Dr. M was very much involved in the sacking. We accept that, and we were critical of it. Then moving forward to 2015, 2016, what I would say is that when the 1MDB scandals became publicized and the international media and the local media was talking about it, one of the first persons to attack the 1MDB scandals was Dr. Mahathir. And he said that on many occasions, and we thought when I say we, there's a group of lawyers, and I name some of them in the book. Some of us thought that he may be interested in reform, and so we went to see him, and we had a few sessions, and we were quite clear on his position on 1MDB, and I think, to be fair, that was consistent during his prime ministership until today. I think each of us were not so sure about his reform program. We were never sure, but when I gave him all those papers on reform and all, he seemed to be interested, didn't deny it, and didn't say, I'm not going to implement it. And I think it's, at the end of the day, politics is the art of the possible. So we are talking about 2017, 2018. The country really needed a break from 60 years of UMNO Barisan rule, and with Najib as Prime Minister then. So you really needed a coalition to defeat. And after 2013, and 2 or 3 attempts by the Anwar Ibrahim Pakatan Harapan, well, I don't know whether it's called Pakatan Harapan, the Pakatan then, just did not have enough votes to clear the crossing line. So the politics being out of the possible, you really thought if you wanted to have a change, you have to have Dr. M on your side.
So you are of the view that Dr. M played a pivotal role in bringing Pakatan Harapan back to government in the election in GA14?
Well, I think pivotal may be too strong a word. I think there are many factors which led to PH's victory and UMNO's and Barisan's defeat. It's multi-causal, and there are many people responsible for it. And of course, DAP and PKR and all can quite rightly claim that they built up the momentum for opposition over 10, 15 years. We accept that. But the difference that Dr. M brought was to make it a winning coalition. So don't forget, Dr. M was a terrific election campaigner. During his time of 22 years, he won 5 general elections. So that is pretty impressive. 5 general elections over 22 years. And then he won again in 2018. So I would say it was certainly one factor. Whether it's pivotal, I'm not so sure.
Okay. In your book, you also recounted how you approached some of the DAP leaders for support for your candidacy. You talked about meeting with Karpal Singh before GE13. You talked about meeting Lim Kit Siang before GE14. And in fact, you mentioned that it was Lim Kit Siang who called you at 5 a.m. in the morning to inform you about that your appointment had gone through. And then, so if you take that, I'm just reflecting the number of questions that I've received. So if you take that, and then when you get to office, the AGC withdraws all the charges against Lim Guan Eng. It shocked many people. Of course, you recused yourself, but there was a lot of shock. People thought it was highly suspicious. One question I got from a rather, it looks like quite an irate viewer, said, "Don't tell me you played no part." So can I ask you, why did your department drop the charges? Was justice done?
Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, truth matters. So what I'm going to say, which was contemporaneously picked up in our press statements by the AGC chambers and which is repeated in the book, is the truth. If the reader doesn't want to believe the truth, I can't help it. And the truth is, I sincerely believe in the conflict of interest principle. I've tried to practice it all my life. And what that means is, if you have a private practitioner becoming an attorney general, it is so very common in most Commonwealth countries that private practitioner from the bar would have any number of clients and friends and business associations or whatever. That doesn't bar him from office. In fact, that's the reason why he's picked in the first place, because of his experience. But the corollary of that is, he is supposed to recuse himself when one of his friends or relatives or clients, or in fact sworn enemies, come before him. That is what I exercised. So when I came into chambers, I told them, look, I am from the bar. I've been practicing for 40 years. I don't know how many people I've sued, how many people I've acted for, and how many friends I have in Kuala Lumpur. If they come up, then I will recuse myself. And that was made clear. They said, yes, they understood that. And then, so it's in that category that Lim Guan Eng fell. And when his case came up, I told the Solicitor General that he must decide. And I said, look, I don't want to know anything about the case. You are taking over, and whatever decision you make. And I also told him, you have to issue a press statement in your own words. And I only want to know about it after the press statement has been released. And that is what happened. That is the truth. If readers don't want to believe it, up to them.
Okay. Did you think it set a bad precedent, though, given that so many of the cases that you yourself later charged are now being let off the hook, charges are being withdrawn and things like that? Do you think it set a bad precedent?
No, you see, you can't answer it that way. All I can say is, when I took a decision, it was always for legal reasons. So I'm wearing my legal hat, and when I charge somebody, that is when I'm taking the decision, when I'm not recusing myself, and there would be only about 20-25 decisions over the 20 months, I would decide based on the evidence and the investigation papers and the law. And I always ask myself, because I'm a trial lawyer, I'm still a trial lawyer, albeit in the civil side, but the similarities are very similar. Can we win the case? Because it's not fair to put somebody on the witness in the dock if the prosecution cannot win the case. So that is the only criteria I used. So when we were reviewing past cases, when representations are made of past cases made by my predecessor and by the AGC during my predecessor's days, again, if those matters come to me, and I think most of these matters did come to me, I would apply my lawyer's thing and say, look, can we win this case? And if the answer is no, we can't, I drop the case. So it is always, and that is the same test we apply for Anwar Ibrahim, and then for Azmin Ali, for LTT, all those cases, it is, if I charge, I thought we could win. If I did not charge, I thought we would lose. Those were the factors. They were legal considerations based on legal law.
I think Roshan has got some questions that are coming in, so maybe I will ask him to come in and ask those questions. Do you have some of those questions, Roshan? Well,
we can't hear it.
You have muted me. Okay, here you go. Sorry about that. But there's a ton of questions just pouring in from all over. And I think one big question from a number of people, David Yee is asking, we seem to be going backwards. in terms of all things, in the legal structure. There's a couple of others that says the country is almost like Zimbabwe to some extent. So maybe quick question, quick reaction from you, Tan Sri Thomas, Tan Sri Tommy. What is your take in terms of where the country is going at this point in time?
Well, I understand all the concerns of your guests, your questioners, your participants, and that is certainly the views of people in the streets, whether in Kuala Lumpur or elsewhere. If you're living in society and you're talking to people, so the concerns are there. I think the problems are so massive now. It will take a long time to redress them. So and of course, I think COVID showed how bad the two governments were, which succeeded to PH after COVID, and the way they dealt with COVID and the lockdowns and the economic consequences and businesses being decimated and the like. And then all the other decisions on. Rather than talking about race, I was thinking maybe we should talk about the majority and the minorities. So there is no doubt that a lot of decisions have the effect of shrinking the space for the minorities. So Tunku Abdul Rahman, as the founder of Malaysia, kept saying, well, first Malaya and then Malaysia, the Malaysian sun is large enough to accommodate all Malaysians. We must accommodate all Malaysians. Well, that is not happening now. So the minorities, whether it's for the drink, for the food, their religious, their clothes, whatever. So democratic space is being shrunk on a daily basis. So there are a lot of complaints. I understand that. But where I would differ from, I guess, a lot of people would be not to give up hope. It's whether you are an optimist or a pessimist, whether you see the glass half full or half empty. So looking at it from a historical perspective, I think anybody who was following the apartheid regime in South Africa in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s would never have thought that the white minority government would fall. And they did. And the worldwide campaign against apartheid, with the rugby boycott, sports boycott, all that. Yep. And then Nelson Mandela being released, and then de Klerk opening his eyes to some extent. So South Africa happened during our lifetime in 20, 30 years. Another example is Allende, when the Chilean democratically elected Marxist leader Salvador Allende was overthrown by CIA-inspired Pinochet in 1975. Those of us who were supportive of social democracy all over the world, he was duly elected, were really upset. And we thought that, and of course with Pinochet being the bloody military leader, caused all kinds of havoc. The hundreds of, at least thousands of people who were killed. And if you talk to somebody in 78 and 79 or in early 80s that Chile will come back to become a democracy, people would say, no, that cannot happen. And yet 25, 30 years later, it took a long time. Pinochet was totally sidelined. You remember the House of Lords decision in the UK, which wanted to have him tried in the UK.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to jump in because we've got so many questions that I need to.
So I just say we must be hopeful still. If our party could be turned around and Chile could be turned around, we shouldn't give up hope in Malaysia.
And I think there are many who are saying that great, I have hope, but there's also some who says hope. I just cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel, like Sean here. But Cheng Ho says, yep, there's hope and let's keep fighting. I have a ton of questions of 1MDB, but I know Dennis also wants to have a shot at that first. So Dennis, we want to take us away on the 1MDB piece, and then we can jump in on some of the audience reactions.
Yes. Well, Tan Sri, a big part of your job was, of course, leading the charge on the 1MDB issue and other high-profile corruption cases, and several senior political figures were charged. Najib himself was found guilty, and we are about to hear the verdict of the appeals court. But following the change in government, so many of these cases are now unraveling. Charges have been withdrawn. The appeal in the case of some of them have not been pursued, and Najib is even suing you for malicious prosecution. So it takes me back to many people are asking this question. Why did you resign as AG following Mahathir's resignation? Now, your appointment was made by the Agong, and therefore, in theory, at least, you remain independent of the government. Somebody asked, why didn't you stay on and fight the good fight?
Well, actually, I was all AGs appointed by the Prime Minister of the day. You are the Prime Minister and the executive branch's chief lawyer. It may be that as a formality, the head of state, in Malaysia, the Young Leaderonomics will appoint you, but it's on advice. So that's insofar as appointment is concerned. Now, why did I not stay? I think the answer is that, and in a sense, can I remind you about the question about me lobbying for the job earlier on, which I didn't have a chance to answer. And if I tie them up together, the reality is any attorney general must be sympathetic to the policies of the government that he's serving. So, for example, if you are passing constitutional amendments, I was always for reform and to give space to the average citizen. Now, if that is my philosophy, I cannot work for a prime minister or a government which believes in shrinking such space. That's not possible. So, for the system to work, the Attorney General must be aligned. He must be a fellow traveler of the government of the day. So that is how it works. And I knew that when Tun Mahathir had resigned on Monday, the 24th of February, and by Friday, it was clear to me that neither he nor any Pakatan Harapan leader would be appointed. And as it turned out, on Sunday, Moidin was appointed, and we knew most probably he was going to be appointed. I shared no philosophical similarities to people like them, who, by the way, had left the coalition that won, and which I voted for among millions of people in May 2018, had Moidin and his friends with the Pakatan Harapan. So for him to ditch and to form a new government was unacceptable to me. So I was not prepared to serve a prime minister who had, in my opinion, betrayed the trust of the electorate. And I didn't want to have any part to do. I didn't want to have any part to do with it. And there's a good chance he would have anyway sacked me, because he's entitled to have his own attorney general.
Najib is now saying that all the charges against him were politically motivated. How do you respond to that?
Well, as I said, all the charges I took are legal decisions. And lawyers and judges are trained that way. You look at a case clinically, and you say, look, when the papers come, by the way, first of all, the investigation papers must come to you, either from the police or the MACC.
But perception matters, doesn't it? Perception matters.
I can't help the perception. You can't have it both ways. If you want somebody from the corporate commercial bar who understands white collar crimes, as 1MDB is, and 1MDB with many of those episodes is pretty complex. I just look at the London judgment that's just come out about 2-3 weeks ago to show how one aspect of its complexity. So, and if you're going to get somebody from the bar to advise and to make those corporate commercial decisions for the prosecution, then it follows that if he or she has written about it or has political views, that is the price you pay. That's what happens in every country.
But how do you explain? I mean, the question that arises in many people's mind is that Mahathir went after some of the top UMNO leaders, certain select UMNO leaders, or at least the authorities, if not Mahathir, the authorities went after certain select UMNO leaders. There were plenty of corruptions in the Ministry of Defense, for example, but nothing came of it. There were plenty of there was that issue of the funds being in the account of the former governor of Bank Negara. Nothing came out of that. There was that Teflon coated guy in Sarawak whom nobody seems to be able to touch, and nothing came out of that. So when you look at the overall picture, when you have certain people being charged with corruption and certain people being given a free ride or not being called to account, it creates the impression that perhaps there was some politically motivated exercises going on. And I think that's the concern that people have.
Understandable, but can I correct right at the beginning? It was not Dr. M who decided to bring all these people to book. He had nothing to do with it. As I kept saying, I was given a free hand. It was my decision to charge. The charging decision during my term was my decision for those senior. So I accept the blame or the responsibility. Now, insofar as why did we only charge A, B, and C and not X, Y, and Z episodes? The answer is very, very simple. Unless the investigation is concluded by the relevant authorities, the Attorney General's chambers do not investigate. We are lawyers. The investigative authorities, and this is all over the world. It could be MACC, the police are typically, they must investigate and complete their investigation. And then they come and give us what we call the IPs, the investigation papers. So in all those examples you've mentioned, those IPs never came to me during my time. If they had come during my time, then if I was satisfied there was a good case, I would have had no hesitation to charge. So it is a very complex system. And I think to some extent, even the people in the MACC were stretched because they've already investigating so many. You forget, we had 5 separate charges against, take Najib for example. We had 5 separate charges against Najib out of 5 1MDB transactions. We had Goldman Sachs. We had charged Jolo and his father. So they were all separate episodes. They're tough white-collar crimes. So, we were trying our best. I could understand MACC saying, look, give us a bit more time. Give us a bit more time. We are preparing.
Do you think Najib will ever serve a day in jail?
Oh, that's not for me to answer.
What's your
I'm in no better position than every person in Malaysia. I have not been consulted after I left 2 years ago.
And what do you think about all these people who have been charged or being convicted, being allowed to travel, their passports are being returned? What's your take on that?
Well, you see, the question that must be asked is so that the law is not brought into disrepute. So I'm speaking now purely from a legal perspective. For the law not to be brought into disrepute and for the rule of law to be applied, everybody really must be treated the same way. In fact, our constitution has the Article 8 on equality. So the test should be, is an average accused, an average convict, an average alleged criminal given these liberties? And if the answer is, well, that is how our criminal justice system works, then there is no criticism. But if our criminal justice system works a different way, and these people are seen to be treated in a different manner, then the legal system gets attacked. And it's at the end of the day, it's the confidence of the people, the public's confidence in the system that keeps it going. So each member of the public is entitled to his or her own view of the way these things are played out.
Okay, I'm not sure whether that will satisfy many people, but I understand that you are taking it from a legal perspective. But
I'm not very happy. I'm not happy that these things are happening because I cannot remember the other accused and other convicts and all being treated this way. I just cannot remember. So I can understand because a family may say, look, my son was charged, or a spouse may say, my husband is in jail. There are thousands of people who are in the criminal justice system. Lawyers may say, look, none of my clients have been treated this way. Those are the questions that arise.
There's one question from Gopalan that says, it seems that there's no justice in our country. How do you respond to that?
I mean, that's too blanket a statement. That's too strong a statement. I mean, that's the other extreme. I think, let's take the legal system, for example. I think there will be on a daily basis, where the courts are sitting all over the country, there will be any number of litigants or parties who and their lawyers who leave the courtroom happy with the result and they've got justice. Like equally, there would be people who are not. So I think it's much more nuanced and complex than that.
Thank you.
I mean, you cannot rule out the entire country and say there's no justice in Malaysia. That's not fair.
Okay, time is going by very fast. Now, let me get your take about corruption. I think nobody needs any reminding that Malaysia has a huge problem with corruption. All our national institutions are compromised. Tun Daim noted, and I quote, corruption has permeated all levels of government. And he talked about the need to cleanse the system. Is that even possible? Can we turn this around? What needs to be done to eradicate corruption in Malaysia? Are you confident that we can overcome corruption?
No, it's a cancer, and I think it starts with 19. I want to just give 10 seconds on history. In 1981, when Hussein On retired as the Prime Minister in 1981, as our third Prime Minister, he left behind the cleanest administration in our history. So you can really trace corruption from 1981. So for 40 years, we've had corruption multiplying, and it's got worse and worse and worse. And what the PH government tried in those 20 months would not even have scratched the surface, because corruption over 40 years is embedded, it's in the system. It's both the private sector and in the public sector. Don't forget, corruption needs two parties. You need the giver and the recipient. So it is a way of Malaysian life, sad to say.
There's a question here. What, in your opinion, is the solution to corruption in Malaysia?
The solution is that you have to have a prime minister and his government which has a political will to eradicate corruption. So it begins at the executive level, and then you have to have an attorney general, public prosecutor who's prepared to charge people, and you must have the agencies, the investigative agencies, which would do the investigation and prepare those papers for the public prosecutor to do his bit.
Are you saying that will happen?
Well, so there are a few things, and of course then there's about the education to the public and all that. So basically it is action. So if I just ask the question, why is whatever you say about Singapore, you must accept that corruption hardly exists or at all, if it exists at all in Singapore. Why is that? And that is because everybody, including Malaysians who go into Singapore, foreigners who are there even for an hour or a day, realize that if they break the law, if they engage in corrupt activities, they will be arrested, the agencies will investigate, they will be prosecuted. They will be prosecuted, and there is a good chance they would face jail time. So that is the best deterrent.
Okay. Moving on. In your book, again, if I may come back to that briefly, you talk about how your appointment quickly, and that was covered in all the media as well. You talk about how quickly your appointment was turned into a racial and religious issue. You were faulted for not being fluent in Bahasa. One minister even said you couldn't be trusted because you didn't swear on the Quran. But most people, I mean, the public saw it for what it was, a racist diatribe. So I want to ask you two questions in that connection. First, and even Dr. Mahathir seems to have come to regret appointing you, and he wanted you to resign. Why do you think Mahathir got cold feet? Why do you think there's this perception that the post of Attorney General has to be held by the majority ethnicity, that somehow appointing a non-Malay is such a huge no-no?
Yes, I mean, I think the response to some extent surprised me, and I thought that there would be enough support, particularly for the PH side, because I was their fellow traveler attorney general, to say, look, at the end of the day, it is just a professional job. At the end of law is a profession. The country, just like medicine, the country needs a legal advisor or a medical advisor. Does it really matter what his race is? Can he just do his job? And I say this because particularly in the private sector, and I've said that in my book, there are any number of Malay institutions, government institutions, have had no problems, and past as a state had no problems appointing me as a lawyer for them. And when that appointment took place, and I stayed on as their lawyer, they did not take into account, I assume they did not take into account racial considerations. So to some extent, we thought that may be the same at the public level, but I think the lesson has been learned. I agree with you that the establishment, and that includes the legal establishment, I must tell you, has taken the position that this is a Malay preserve from Merdeka. I accept that.
What was it like working with Dr. Mahathir?
Oh, it was fine. He left me alone. He was a good listener. I would go and visit him once in a week, or once in 10 days, or once in 2 weeks to report on things, and just to keep him abreast. And he left me alone. And as I said, there's the one time he did not listen to legal advice was Zakir Naik, and that's documented in the book, where I was for his deportation. Because he was, putting it mildly, he was a nuisance in his host country. But Dr. M thought otherwise. And the extradition process requires the Home Minister and the government to be involved. It's not just the prerogative of the Attorney General, and also and finally the courts can consider it if there's a challenge, as in Pinochet. So extradition was much more complex. Tun Dr. M didn't want him sent. He never gave me a reason, and I don't know why till today he doesn't want Zakir out of Malaysia.
Thank you. Now, let me move on to another question that kept coming up. Another big issue during your time as Attorney General was the Suhakam report that both Pastor Raymond Koh and Amri Chemat were victims of enforced disappearances, and that it was carried out by agents of the state, namely the Special Branch. In fact, today marks the 5th anniversary of the disappearance of Amri Chemat. Looking at the Suhakam report, it was a pretty damning thing. It was a dark stain on our nation's already dismal human rights record. Certainly, in the view of many, the justice system failed both Raymond Koh and Amri Chemat and Joshua Hilmi and his wife. Now, you were Attorney General at the time of the Suhakam report, if I'm not mistaken. Can you help us to understand why the justice system, along with other state agencies, did not get to the truth about these disappearances, or at least were not exercised sufficiently to pursue these cases?
Well, there was somebody called Teo Wing Hock. There was a list of missing persons and unexplained cases when we took office in May 2018. I understand that, and we were conscious of it. But the problem is that to investigate these matters, because lawyers and the judges and the courts come at the tail end, we needed fresh investigations. And the fresh investigations never got us anywhere. You cannot ask the police to investigate the police. Who guards the guards? So who polices the police? So you had to get other agencies to investigate. And that's what was attempted. But I agree with you that unfortunately, there's been no effective answers. And we are no wiser today, 3-4 years later, about why they went missing, apart from the Suhakam reports kind of thing. I understand that. So it's a sad day for Malaysia. I'm really sorry that during our time we couldn't do anything about it.
Why is that? Could you have done?
Yeah, because no one is investigating. You cannot just act irrationally. You have to have a report. Somebody has to go and investigate and reopen, and it was a question of them not giving us the answers, the tools.
So the whole system is now held hostage to whether or not a report is made.
No, it's not the reports were made. You must be
I mean, the
acting on it.
investigation. The
That's right.
investigation.
That's right. Correct.
Okay,
Investigations.
we've only got about 15 minutes left, and another huge bunch of questions that I had is regarding the whole move towards greater Islamization in Malaysia, whatever that might mean. PAS, as you know, has got RUU 355 before Parliament, and I got many questions on this subject. There's a great deal of worry about creeping Islamization. You, as a renowned constitutional expert and lawyer, and I know you've also written several legal essays on the constitutional aspects of the whole Islamic state debate. Now, so let me ask you a couple of questions arising out of that. First, are we sliding towards an Islamic state? Two, do you think the constitution allows such a thing to happen, and should we be worried?
Yes to the first, no to the second, and yes, we should be worried. We should be worried.
We should be worried.
The Constitution is very clear, and as you said, I wrote about it in 2007 to answer the question: is Malaysia an Islamic state? And I said no. In my opinion, after doing research for 3-4 months, I've written about it. It's published. It's not. We are a secular state, and of course, I'm happy for others to disagree with me. That's the beauty of the law and constitutional law. There are others who are entitled to their own opinions, but I have put forward reasons as to why I say that we are not an Islamic state. But if the political agenda, the executive branch, supported by the civil servants, which you have written in great detail in your book, and let me tell those who are watching your show to buy and read your book on the chapters of relating to Islamization, then you have to worry. So again, I would use it as an example of the space shrinking, because if you look at it from a religious point of view, yes, it's one religion trying to dominate other religions in a plural society. That is one way of characterizing it. Another way of characterizing it is saying that happens to be the majority religion, and it is not giving enough space to other religions to coexist. And they are meant to coexist, and there is supposed to be diversity.
Now, recently in the news, we've had a lot of there's been a lot of discussion over the big fuss that PAS made over the brand Tima, the whiskey. There have been the ban on alcohol sales. I mean, the curbs on alcohol sales, the 4D lotteries. Lots of people are complaining about dress codes being quietly enforced in many government departments, even in police stations. And there's a sense of frustration that we can't seem to depend. I mean, I'm just quoting a question that came in, that we can't seem to depend on our politicians to defend the secular nature of our nation. And so the question that many are asking is, how can ordinary citizens use legal avenues to challenge the many arbitrary and discriminatory religious-based regulations that are being introduced and enforced upon Malaysian society as a whole?
Well, the simple answer, and that's within their control, is to challenge these things in the courts of Malaysia, because most of these items, most of these decisions are illegal, they are unconstitutional. So you gave the example of the beer, the liquor, and then let me remind you of another unlawful policy that they were announcing, which was trying to get the shares, of 51% shares of companies belonging to the freight industry. All those things are unconstitutional, they are illegal. But that remains the opinion of some lawyers, and obviously certainly that reflects my opinion. Until a court has an opportunity of ruling it unconstitutional or illegal, it remains an opinion of a lawyer. So there are any number of lawyers, me included, and fortunately for Malaysia, there are any number of lawyers who are happy to do what we call public interest cases, often pro bono, sometimes with reduced fees, and to challenge these matters. That's been our history, unlike a lot of other countries where lawyers are threatened. We are not. But we need a client, we need a litigant. So in the last 1 or 2 years, since I've come back to practice, a lot of lawyers have said, look, we want to challenge these things, but we don't have clients. So to me, part of this is also self-inflicted by the aggrieved Malaysians. There is a climate of fear that they are really worried that even if they appoint a lawyer and take the matter to court, which, by the way, is the civilized forum for resolving disputes. The courts are provided by taxpayers. It's part of the system. And yet, if Malaysians are worried and frightened, then it's a real commentary on freedom in Malaysia. So I would say, please challenge them in court.
Perhaps that comes to the point that there is a climate of fear. You referenced my book earlier on. When I tried to get my book published and printed, I had a really difficult time because nobody wanted to touch it because it was politics. They were afraid they might lose their license and things like that. So there's a general climate of fear, and I think that's why people are afraid. But I take your point that there's no point just complaining about these things. We Malaysians, ordinary citizens, must connect with lawyers like yourself to challenge these kinds of discriminatory regulations. And I think we need to do that at every step of the way. So I'm happy to hear you say that. Let me move on to the Malacca state elections. I think few expected UMNO to do so well, and few still expected Pakatan Harapan to do so badly. Were you surprised?
Well, I want to challenge your premise. I think if I've got a piece of paper, I wanted to get the statistics. So let's get the facts first. The facts are that looking at the popular vote first, the popular vote, UMNO, Barisan just went up less than 0.5%. Their popular vote was 37.8 in GE14 and went up to 38.4, less than 0.5%. So it's not so much about support for UMNO and Barisan that has happened. They've remained where they are, but the sharp decline for PH. So PH was 51% in GE14. They became 35.8, a 16% drop on Pakatan's part. And likewise, quite a large support for Bersatu. They had a 24% popular support, although they only got 2 seats. So I would say that as a result of gerrymandering the last 60 years, the first past, the post, quite a lot of consequences. You have the situation where a party with just 38% of the popular vote got 21 seats out of 28. So that is my first comment about it. My second comment would be that Pakatan Harapan really lost the election. They have to have a thorough self-examination. They have to look at the mirror individually, as a party, and then as a coalition. There is a tremendous disconnect between PH and the voters. And if they do not learn from Malacca, they will be punished even more in GE15. And
do you think it's time for it?
UMNO would succeed by default.
Do you think it's time for a generational change of leadership?
I mean, that is certainly what, if you read the online, that is certainly what the readers are saying. And that's not a problem. That option should be on the table. I think Malaysian political parties from Merdeka Day has been dominated by leaders who are very reluctant to give up power. They want to stay on, whether in opposition or in the national coalition. There are any number of examples. They love to stay on in power and cling on. And
there's a lot of talk about anti-hopping. I'm sorry, I have to keep interrupting you because I'm running out of time and I've got so many questions still. There's a lot of talk about anti-hopping law. All our politicians seem to be in favor of it, but I don't see any concrete steps being taken towards actually doing something about it. Do you think we need an anti-hopping law, and do you expect to see it come to pass?
I definitely support an anti-hopping law, and I have to say I was wrong. I initially took the position for 20 years that we didn't need it, but after the last 2 governments in the federal level changing because of party hopping, I'm for a new law, and it's quite easy to draft a law that will pass constitutional muster, and it's a question of the political will. Have they got a political will? Are they truthful about it? And you need 2/3 majority, which should be easily obtainable if the politicians are sincere. So it's one thing for them to say we support anti-doping law, and for them not to do anything. It's within their hands.
That's interesting. What about the MOU with the government? Are you in favor of it? Do you think it served a purpose, or do you think it should have been ditched a long time ago?
I don't know what it is. I have not spoken to anybody who knows what the MOU is. Nobody has read it. There's been no full disclosure. It's pretty opaque. So first of all, we don't know what the terms of that relationship are. And secondly, if the budget was anything to go by, the budget that was so lopsided in favor of the majority, if that is one of the items of support in the MOU, then I can assure you that the opposition which supports this will again be punished at the polls, because in all countries it is 101 politics that the function of an opposition is to oppose the budget. That is the function of the opposition. The opposition is not supposed to go and support the budget. So Malaysian politicians have taught political science in many, many different ways, just like Dr. M resigning. That was again an absolutely incredible phenomena in political science.
Okay, thank you. Look, we're almost out of time now. Tan Sri, you've been, it's been over a year since you resigned. I'm sure you've had a lot of time to reflect on the PH years and your own role in it. Many will remember the Pakatan Harapan period as a tumultuous era in Malaysian politics. Never was there greater hope and expectation, and never was there greater disappointment. Now, you had a ringside seat. You were part of the administration. When you look back, very quickly, what do you think went wrong, and what was Mahathir's role in the eventual collapse of Pakatan Harapan? I'm only going to give you a minute to answer that, so my apologies.
No, I think the resignation, as I said, on the morning of Monday, the 24th of March at 9 o'clock, when business opened, the opening of business hours on 24th of February, we had a very strong coalition with 122 MPs, and it was what the electorate voted for. And by lunchtime, the Prime Minister resigned. And not only did he resign, then he tendered the resignation of his government. And that has unleashed any number of unintended consequences. We've had the most unstable government since. So nobody expected that. And you can't legislate for that. You can't plan for that. So it is why the Prime Minister did what he did is something else. But the fact is he did it. And nobody expected that, because you're planning for 5 years. And then there was no reason why a successful PH government could not have been re-elected. So it could have been a 10-year government. And then I end by saying, don't lose hope. Those who are disappointed, please make sure that, again, you come to vote in G15 whenever that is held. And of course, this is outside everyone's control. Let's hope we have an option. The alternatives are there for us to vote for. So don't give up.
How would you like to be remembered as Attorney General?
Oh, not at all. I mean, that's for others to say. I mean,
all right, we've run out of time. Tan Sri, thank you so much for talking to Critical Conversations, and thank you all for joining us and for your comments and questions. There were so many comments and questions. I'm not sure whether we're going to have time for that. But my special thanks to Roshan Thiran and the team at Leaderonomics for making this show possible. Please stay with us for the final segment as Roshan talks to Tan Sri about leadership. Roshan, over to you, and thank you and good night.
Right. So, Tan Sri, there's tons of questions out there, and I'll get to one or two of them, I think. But I just, a lot of the questions are really a desperate cry for solutions, right? Because, like you said, we've had bad leadership that has permeated over the last 3-4 decades. But how do we mitigate it? Maybe it's a two-tiered question. I think the first part is what really went wrong. You kind of point at 81, and then everything just went, sort of derailed. But more importantly, how do we get ourselves back on track, and how do we learn from some of the mistakes made and steer our path back towards a part of hope, because I think even though you did say let's have hope, a lot of people just cannot see hope. So I mean, what do you subscribe, or what do you suggest as possible ways to re-rail ourselves back into tracks, and get back to the way forward?
Well, I think the one practical way would be for the politicians who've caused the mess. All the problems we've talked about have been caused by essentially by the executive branch, by the politicians, and for their own selfish reasons. But they have been successful. So a politician will tell you, a politician anywhere in the world will tell you that if he has to he has to face the ballot box, and he has to be elected every 5 years or 4 years, he has to put forward policies or make statements that the electorate supports. So we may be criticizing the politicians, but what we forget, and let's look at the majority point of view. All these terrible things that they have been doing, the politicians, in the last 2 years, they were not punished at the polls in Malacca. They still got 39%. So my question is, if I were a successful UMNO politician, I would be laughing and saying, look, I have managed to tell these people, my electorate, brainwash them, propaganda, whatever, of course, full of lies. There's no truths in our public life anymore. And yet they continue to elect me. So I have got a successful package, a successful product. Why should I change? So the electorate must say, look, we are going to punish these people and we are going to vote them out. So all these frogs who jumped must be voted out. All those who are making racist remarks, those who are shrinking our space, those who are corrupt, they must be voted out. So I urge the electorate, please use your vote and vote wisely. That's the point, because that's what democracy is about. So it's only good. At the end of the day, you wonder who is reacting to whom. Because the politicians may say, I am reacting to my people because this is what my people want. My people want corrupt government. My people want me to make racist remarks. My people want me to shrink the space of other people. I will do it and I get rewarded by re-election. So think of that. Kadia. I think we can't hear you, Roshan.
Okay.
I missed that.
Somebody got muted again. This is, I think, the biggest issue with digital these days, right? Everybody gets muted. But I think those are fair comments, and some great comments coming from different folks to say this is a great platform to have conversations, but we need more because spaces like this are shrinking. So thank you, Stephen, and others who have the comment. One big question that is popping up is your thoughts on ZTE and 1MDB. I mean, there's at least 5 or 6 folks who have asked this question. What are your thoughts on ZTE and 1MDB?
No, I think it is public knowledge and has been for a long time the role of ZTE and her husband in facilitating Jolo in the 1MDB. But I think when we were investigating 1MDB, and as I said, it gave rise to about 7 or 8 prosecutions against different parties. At that stage, the MACC papers had not, at least to my knowledge, had not been completed on ZTE and all the others. So I never had a chance to look at those IPs. But what I would say is, if the IPs are completed, if they've finished their investigations, and if they've got a strong and convincing case, then they have to present it to the public prosecutor, who will then do the necessary. Because surely the lesson we've learned is that if a former prime minister and a former deputy prime minister is not immune from prosecution, he's not above the law, certainly a former director of the Bank Negara is not. Yep. For us, it's important that everybody is amenable to the laws of the land. But you must have a case. There must be a case.
Yep. So some key takeaways I get is about hope. Keep having that hope. And if you could leave us as we wrap up today with one final piece of advice for our viewers out there. There's I think thousands and thousands. I think it's like 5,000 or so just on YouTube and some of the other platforms watching us today. What sort of final piece of advice? I know you did give one. Take our word seriously. Make sure you're out there and making that change. But if you could leave us with another piece of nugget of wisdom, what advice would you leave us with?
No, I think building on that, just that the electorate, the people of Malaysia, and it doesn't matter whether you're a voter or not. Or well, please get yourself on the register. But it will help if the people of Malaysia demonstrate their disgust or their disagreement online or in any other ways that they want. And of course, we just heard that Bersih may be organizing a march down the road. I saw that online yesterday or today. So for the citizenry to be engaged and to participate. So Dennis began by reminding us of what Thomas Jefferson said 200 years ago, that the citizens all have a role. And so we keep pushing the envelope and in a sense try and replicate what happened in 2016, 2017, 2018. Because at the end of the day, the change of government took place because the ground was palpable. The electorate was very upset. So I asked if we had done it once before, we can do it again. And that's what the people of Malaysia must manifest their anger in whichever way they want. But of course, peaceful. We are a very peaceful country. Peaceful means matter.
Absolutely. So thanks everyone for joining us. Dennis, your final key takeaway as we wrap today up. Your final thoughts, Dennis.
No, I think it's very good that we had this conversation. I'm so happy that there's so many comments coming in, and obviously people are very involved. They are very interested. They want to hear answers. They want this kind of discussions to continue. And like I said, we've got a great lineup of people coming up on the show. So please stay tuned. And you won't be disappointed. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Thank you so much. And for everybody watching, this has been Critical Conversations. We will be wrapping up shortly. Thank you for being part of us. We will be having many different guests, right? Dennis, you want to just quickly share what's in store for the next few episodes?
Well, we've got, I'm not sure whether I can mention the names. I'm not ready to do that, but we've got a lineup of a whole bunch of people. Some you will like, some you will love to curse, but they all got a story to tell, and we really need to hear their side of the story. Thank you.
Very good. With that, goodbye for now. And this has been Critical Conversations hosted by Dennis Ignatius. Bye for now. Bye, everyone. Learn is at the heartbeat of growth.